TikToker Saron Olkaba usually makes content related to celebrity culture. Then she did a DNA test and discovered she's Jewish.
I'm Jewish. I am hella Ethiopian Jew. And not just that, look down there. There's a splash of Ashkenazi.
I'm Jonathan Sacerdoti. Saron Olkaba, thank you so much for joining me today. You're a content creator and a political consultant, but you recently had a very interesting discovery. What was that?
So I took a DNA test, and I'm Ethiopian. I was born in Ethiopia. I was very certain about that part of my heritage, but I was very eager to know a little bit more. So I went ahead and I got my DNA run, and I was very surprised to find out that, like, not only am I Ethiopian Jewish, like, I just found out that I have like 17% Yemeni Jew and some Ashkenazi in there, and it was a part of my history that I had absolutely no idea about.
And before that, you didn't know you had any Jewish heritage?
None whatsoever. None at all. I actually grew up going to very conservative Christian evangelical schools my entire life. And I never really aligned with anything that was being presented to me from that point of religion, if I'm saying it, to say it nicely. I never really, evangelical Christianity never really spoke to me in a serious way. There were a lot of contradictions. You're not allowed to ask a lot of questions, and that never sat well. So I absolutely did not know of any of my Jewish heritage whatsoever. But I was surprised that when I brought this up to my mother, she wasn't surprised at all. She said, "Yeah, you didn't know?" And I said, "Of course I didn't know, Mother. We never had this conversation." So I did speak to her about it, and she knew that her mother was raised in a Jewish household, but there came a time when they were forced to convert to Christianity, and in hopes of like keeping my mother and her children, safe and free from all of the persecution that comes along with being a Jew, basically anywhere, also in Ethiopia. She really held on tight to that. And so I found out so much about Ethiopian Jews, that diaspora, and even like down to the tattoos that my grandmother had on her neck and face. I truly had no idea the history of that. But to understand that, she was forced to get these tattoos in order to keep herself safe. It's pretty incredible.
So can you describe? I mean, I'm familiar with the tattoos that a lot of Ethiopian Jews had. Can you describe them for those who aren't?
Right. So specifically, my grandma and many of the women that I've seen, women and men, have crosses on their foreheads, some on their cheeks, and then they have like designs on their neck. I was shocked. My family's fairly conservative. We're not really the tattooing bunch, but I came to America when I was like 2 years old, and I hadn't seen my grandma since then. And until she came to visit us for the first time in America when I was 13. And that's when I saw the tattoos on her for the first time, and I was shocked. I was very shocked. But my mother told me, she was like, "That's just what they did back then." I don't think she wanted to have the conversation about, that trauma.
So you were born in Ethiopia?
Yes, correct. I was.
And your grandma lived or still lives there?
She lived there for her entire life. She passed away, I think about 8 or 9 years ago. My mom was kind of sheltered from that experience herself, and my grandma is really the only connection I have to someone who was raised, as an Ethiopian Jew. It's not something I'm running from. It's something I want to learn more about. It's part of actually why I even pursued getting my DNA tests whatsoever. Like, I don't know if you saw in my video that a couple months ago, I purchased a book on Beta Israel, right? And I was just drawn to learning more about Ethiopian Judaism. And for my ancestry to come back to align, a lot of people have said that, a Jewish soul is a Jewish soul, right? Like, there's something inside of you that is drawn to, the tribe. So I definitely felt that.
That's really interesting. I don't know if you saw Alanis Morissette had a similar experience, actually. There's a TV show where they did her DNA, and she was actually, when she was 28, she discovered herself she was Jewish, and then the DNA showed, I think, more Jewishness than she'd realized. So, and she said she'd always felt that draw to, she'd said particularly the Passover Seder, that she liked going to those. And
So real. So like, I actually, it's so funny. I dated a Jewish man for 7 years, and my mother was so like open and excited about it. And she was like, are you gonna, convert to Judaism? And I was very shocked because, like I said, she sent me to these Christian schools forever. I was always so confused about why she was so open to my, interest in Judaism, being with a Jewish man. But anyways, I learned what a mezuzah was a couple years ago. And I was like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever heard of. And I purchased one. And I gave it to my boyfriend as a gift, as a Hanukkah gift. All of these, real tangible items, like there's a real draw there.
Well, it's really interesting. And anyway, let me be not the first, but one of the first perhaps to say welcome. And we're happy to have you. And in fact, you said that you grew up in this evangelical Christian background where you said questioning wasn't really particularly encouraged. I'm probably going to tell you something you may have discovered already. Questioning is more or less what we're about as Jews. So I think you're on a really interesting journey. Now, I want to say, I heard on your videos online that you experienced, as well as quite a lot of welcoming comments, quite a lot of strange, hostile and aggressive comments.
Bizarre, like absolutely bizarre. The conspiracy theories that people have are outrageous. And just like the disdain that some people feel for someone to be excited about being Jewish. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not my being excited about this part of my heritage isn't an attack on anybody else. It's just a remarkable thing. There aren't that many Jewish people in the world. To be a part of this tribe is a beautiful thing, right? But people who are not Jewish want to do anything that they can to separate you from this community, I don't know if they see an exceptionalism in it or if I don't understand what the offense is, but there are so many conspiracy theories. There are, of course, Israel comes up constantly. Like I'm being asked if I'm a Zionist over and over and over again. And
are you a Zionist?
What a question. I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that question right now. I certainly am not prepared to answer that question so publicly, but it's something that I'm very much thinking about. I have to figure out what my relationship is to all of this. I know that Israel exists and Israel should exist and it will continue to exist and I will support its, existence. That's something I can full on say right here, right now. But
by the way, I'm talking to you now from Israel. I'm here in Tel Aviv. There's a whole community of Ethiopian Jews, as you know, in Israel, because there was a time when there was a big influx of them to Israel, particularly to actually escape the persecution that they'd experienced there.
Thus the need for an Israel, right? And I think that it's a beautiful thing, the Ethiopian community within Israel, and learning more about them and specifically from them is very important to me. So I want to have more conversations with Beta Israel, people living in Israel themselves. I've, of course, part of like the negativity that I've gotten over and over again are, they're racist there. They don't want Black people. And my answer to that is like, there are racists everywhere. Where am I going to go where I'm not going to meet some kind of bigoted asshole, it's inevitable. But that's not at the core of what Israel is. That's not the point of this. They did not bring and accept, all of these Ethiopian Jews from Israel, go out of their way to bring them here because they don't want them. Absolutely not. There are ignorant people of all ilks, I'm not going to say that that's a reason why I'm not for Israel, because there happen to be racists there. I'm sitting in America right now,
The Ethiopian immigration to Israel is among the more successful in many ways. There's actually quite a lot of Ethiopians who've been successful in the Israeli army and feel very sort of integral part of the society. I'm curious, because you grew up as somebody who didn't know you were Jewish, but you are a person of color, and I wonder how the racism you might have experienced before you knew you were Jewish to racism you might have experienced since finding out you were Jewish compares. Is there a comparison to be made?
People are much more bold about being an anti-Semite, much more bold about it. They can code it much more easily than they can, just write out being a bigot who, I hate Black people. There's how do I say? It's a lot more binary when it comes to being a racist about my being a Black person. When it comes to being an anti-Semite, you can code it in so many different ways that they'll discombobulate you for sure. But it still comes from an anti-Semitic, you don't belong place.
That's really interesting, actually, and I must say quite depressing to hear.
Yes.
So it's unfortunate thing maybe you've discovered on this moment that you were actually quite happy and fascinated about, right?
Yes, but as I am a Black woman, I think I have a thick skin. I'm a Black woman on the internet. I a lot of things roll off my back, but it was very evident. It would take a lot for someone to call me the N-word in my comment section, right? But for someone to shoot some crazy conspiracy theory at me about me being paid by the Israeli government to be some mouthpiece for that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. Multiple people have accused me of being paid by the Israeli government.
It's interesting to me because it sounds like it's actually a bit of a confusion for racists now that you have kind of this dual position they can be racist to you in, and maybe some people that had absolutely no racist feeling towards you for being Black have racist feelings towards you for being Jewish immediately. Nothing about you changed except that you had a realization about your DNA, and suddenly boom, 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 boom in the comments, right?
Correct. Nothing, absolutely nothing changed about who I am, the way I speak, what I talk about, other than, discussing my, diving into this part of my heritage. Nothing about me has changed. But the perception of who I am has changed in a way that I can clearly see in my comment section. But even with all of that, I don't care. The response I had from the Jewish community is tenfold whatever the negativity that I've received. Perhaps in number, they might be on par, but in feeling and in sincerity and, in openness, I've gained quite a bit.
That's great. And I'm really pleased to hear that. And I'm not surprised, actually, by the way, that the Jewish community, if one can talk of a Jewish community, has been welcoming, because I think generally speaking, people are really fascinated and very welcoming when somebody has a moment like the one you had. In fact, you asked, your mum said when you were previously dating a Jewish guy if you were going to convert, which is quite funny because you said that she also knew that you were actually Jewish. And being Jewish through your matrilineal line, I assume, means that you're actually halachically Jewish as far as Orthodox Judaism is concerned. Is that the case?
Yeah, it comes from my mother's line, my mom, my grandma, my great-grandma. So I believe it's not a situation of me having to convert, but also I think from a place of respect. I don't know a lot, and I haven't been in this community my entire life. So there's a lot for me to learn. Yeah. There's a lot for me to still understand. So I'm sure there will have to be some process for me to kind of not assimilate, but join the Jewish community in a more formalized way. but it's definitely something I'm interested in. Part of the beauty of Judaism for me is, it's like come as you are. It doesn't.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense that again, it sounds like you're taking a really responsible and respectful attitude towards it. But on the other hand, there's no instruction book for joining an ethnicity, and that's the
right.
thing about Judaism is that you can grow up not knowing you are ethnically Jewish, as you have done. You couldn't have grown up not knowing you were ethnically Ethiopian.
Correct. Which is another thing that's come up in that video. It's like, but you're Ethiopian. Yeah, obviously. Like, there is no question about that. I was born in Ethiopia. I have an Ethiopian birth certificate. I understand that I'm Ethiopian. I'm not surprised about, any of my DNA from Somalia, right? The Judaism part is the big deal here, right? Like, that's the new information that we're getting.
Right.
And that's not a rejection of my Blackness. And I think that that's a lot of where the racism comes in. You can't be Black and you can't be a Jew. That's not true. That's not true. And to think of Judaism as a European religion and not, a diasporic ethno religion encompassing many types of people, it's just willful ignorance, honestly.
And then there's, of course, particularly at the moment, there's quite a lot of aggressive talk and action going on about Jews being white colonizers.
Right. And I'm obviously not a white person, and I live within the United States. I learned about this aspect of my ethnicity 1 month ago, right? So, yeah. That has come up. It's a complex conversation to have, especially like as a Ethiopian American woman who has now found out that she is ethnically a part of a community that has so many sensitive conversations happening around it. Yeah.
So I saw you did a video about wearing a cross pendant and David pendant. So tell me about that.
So I truly never considered the fact that I was wearing a murdered Jewish man around my neck. That was not the context in which I saw the crucifix, right? Jesus exists as, he is God himself. The only reason this man was put on earth was to, save humanity, save Christians. We don't harp on the fact that he's a Jewish man that, was horribly persecuted. So honestly, when I did find out about my Jewish heritage, I did look at the crucifix a little differently, and I do not feel as comfortable wearing it, honestly. I don't. But I still have it on because I feel like it's a conversation that I have to have with my mom beforehand. I'm not a religious person, right? This cross is not a reflection of my, my commitment to Christianity, not at all. It's more of a commitment to my mom, and to make her feel something. But it's complicated given her openness to my, diving into Judaism. I think that, I think she'd be okay with that. But I know that eventually I will be taking this off.
Obviously, you discovered the anti-Semites pretty quickly, but you also discovered some slightly nicer people too, like the Jewish mothers. Tell me.
They are a fun bunch. They're very eager to see their sons married. And I mentioned that I was single, and that was like I let out a bat signal, and there were mothers in my inbox very much trying to sell their sons to me, and they were doing a good job. They are just a zealous bunch, very few boundaries. I like it. I can see myself in them,
Have you got any Jewish dates lined up?
Not yet, but hopefully soon. Fingers crossed.
You're interested in dating Jewish guys?
Yeah, of course. Honestly, when it's strange. You find out you're a part of this community that is so small, and you want to protect it, right? You want to make sure that this beautiful culture is, continued and celebrated. So I do see that such great value in having being with a Jewish man and having a Jewish family, especially if I decide to pursue, this religiously more deeply. So yeah, ideally, yeah.
So it's interesting because I think you're discovering your Jewish identity at a time when lots of Jews are actually, a couple of things have happened, I would say. Some are very afraid to express their Jewishness as publicly as they might have done once. And yet you're in a moment where you're expressing yours really publicly. And the other thing that I think's happened in response to the situation here in Israel, and also the wave of unbridled anti-Semitism that's sort of sweeping around the world at the same time, is that it has brought a lot of Jewish people together. And I think there's been something of a resurgence of Jewish identity. So it's kind of got its pluses and minuses, what's happening. That's a really unusual time for you to be discovering this part of yourself and going on this journey. Has that been a part of your experience so far?
So I don't think it's ever a bad time to be who you are, right? And to be who you are publicly and proudly. It didn't cross my mind for a second to not post that video and speak about it as, loudly as I did. And if anything, the anti-Semitic comments and any of the negativity I received made me want to talk about it even more, because it's absurd. As someone who literally just found out this about myself, you can't prescribe all of these preconceived notions to me just because something changed 1 second ago. You found out something about me 1 second ago. So it shouldn't change how you feel. And if it does, then I don't want you around to begin with. You're not my kind of people. It makes me sad, the comments from other Jews saying, wow, I can't believe you're talking about this so openly. It brings me sadness, because there is nothing shameful about being a Jew, period, at any time. Especially now, despite the conflict, that does not take away the beauty of the people, certainly doesn't take away the beauty of the community. And until you've experienced this kind of community, you can't speak on it. You can't speak on it because it is incredibly unique. So it's a strange time to be finding out that you're Jewish, but I can't help but think it's for a reason that I'm finding out now, because with such, the world associating such darkness with this community, that's just not what it is. And you deserve to be spoken about proudly. And I'm, proud to do it. And I will continue to do it.
You mentioned that you're just, you want to study more and learn more and kind of immerse yourself more in it, knowing now what you do about your own cultural identity and heritage. So how are you going about that? Is it cultural? Is it religious? Is it a bit of both? Have you found a rabbi, a synagogue? Have you been to a synagogue yet?
I have not. I actually am going out to dinner with someone I met on TikTok, who is in the Jewish community here in DC tomorrow, and we're going to talk about options that I have for exploring the religious part a little bit more, but also the cultural part of it. It's incredibly important. But talking to a rabbi is very high on my list of things to do. I have a lot of questions, but also speaking to Ethiopian Jews themselves, and hearing about what their firsthand experience has been for from the time they were in Ethiopia, their ancestors were Ethiopia to up to now. Understanding that experience is very important to me, because I don't have my grandma here or my great grandma to explain what that history, what that trauma was like. So it's not very easy to find Ethiopian Jews here in the United States, but I have spoken to a few online, and their commitment to Israel is unmatched. There is a lot of appreciation for Israel from that community, and that's a beautiful thing.
Well, I'd love to connect you with any Ethiopian Jewish communities and what have you here if I can, so we can certainly talk about it offline. And I'll say that, I think there's a reason that a lot of Ethiopian Jews have that feeling towards Israel, because despite this kind of ignorant characterization of Israel as a white colonial state, the actual truth of it is, and the Ethiopian immigration wave was a good example, it was actually very open to Jews of all colors and ethnicities from around the world, and saving them from the various kinds of persecution that Jews have experienced throughout history. So it's true that it's had its doors open to Jewish immigration predominantly, but within that Jewish immigration, Jews come in all colors and sizes and backgrounds, and Israel has been one of the most uniquely successful places where different ethnic and cultural groups have come together and kind of made a melting pot society. I mean, America, again, is a place where people have managed that. And as you said, I think none of those societies are without problems to do with discrimination and racism, but they're also great successes.
Correct. That can't be ignored.
Yeah. And I think that, you're certainly in a good position to understand that, having moved there when you were 2 from Africa. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I'm sure you've had your own stories to tell before the DNA test. Tell me a bit about your mum and your grandma then, because you must have had some interesting conversations since you got that DNA result, and maybe found out any more details or stories about time in Ethiopia and kind of how it came through to where you are now.
Honestly, I have not gotten that much clarity from my mother about what I sense that there's like real trauma there, especially when she's like referencing my grandmother and what she experienced. I haven't gotten a lot of details out of her, but I'm sure I have been in flux in my life right now. So I have not been having a lot of like deep conversations with anyone as I've just been moving house and all this stuff. But I know that the little that I've gotten from her so far is she always wanted to explore her Judaism, but her mother very much ingrained in her that if this is something that you talk about, you will be mocked, you will be ridiculed, you will not have the same life that you have right now. So it's something that's scary for her. I can tell that she feels it's beautiful and something that she wants to embrace. But there's also like this real fear there. And it makes me sad.
But so it sounds to me like because she had that fear, she didn't go there, but in a way she seems quite excited that you're doing it.
Exactly. I think that for my mother, I'm like her confusing child. I've always been like very open and very, myself and very straightforward. And she is not that way. She's a little bit more meek. And
have you got brothers and sisters, by the way?
I have 3 sisters. They're all my half sisters, right? So 2 of them have a different mother than me. So those 2 I do not believe are Jewish, but one of them has my mom. We share a mother, and she has children. So I was like, you have Jewish kids. Like, it was wild. I'm like, you have an entire Jewish family here. Yeah.
Wow. Have they been like, is it, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Or are they also kind of interested, if you don't mind me asking?
It was like a happy surprise. There was no negativity in it. I think that I'm the most interested in like really diving into it. But my sister was like very happy, like surprised in like a very good way. This is something interesting to learn about herself, but I don't think it really changed how I don't think it changed as much for her as it did for me.
A sensitive question for me to ask, so apologies if I kind of put my foot in it and say it the wrong way, but there is, I think, one strain of anti-Semitism which does come sometimes from certain parts of the Black community, and I wonder if you'd ever experienced that before and then ever experienced it afterwards. I mean, for example, the whole Kanye thing. And even in that, he referenced some quite old stereotypes of Jews that were specific to some sections of Black culture. So the idea that there were original tribes and things like that who believed that they were more Jewish than the Jews.
I've gotten so many of those bizarre comments. Nobody should listen to Kanye West about anything. Okay, I haven't listened to a single one of his songs since he said that slavery was a choice, and then he went on to say that these psychotic Jewish racist tropes, and then the white lives matter. It's just Kanye shouldn't be spoken about at all. He's not a person. He's not someone that we should reference in any way, shape, or form. The only people who talk about gradients of Judaism and like rankings of Jewish people are non-Jews. And that's all I need to know. You know what I mean? That is all I need to hear. The comments that I've received from the Black community about this, the only ones that have been negative have been referencing my Judaism as if it's a rejection of my Blackness, you know, as if those two things couldn't coexist in one person, you know. And I think we kind of talked about this earlier a little. I think the comments that I've received from the Black community are more so you being so excited about being Jewish is you rejecting being Black. It's you not being excited about being an African. It's you're embracing some kind of European religion or ethnicity, and that has nothing to do with it. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is in like my blood, you know? That doesn't make me any less Ethiopian. The word Ethiopian is still in front of the word Jew, right?
It's an extraordinary reaction, actually, when you put it like that. Like, it's such a weird response to what you're doing for people to assume it's a rejection of being Ethiopian.
Yeah. And I see that, but I don't take it personally because, I mean, you can't be as Ethiopian as I am and take it seriously when someone says that you're rejecting being Ethiopian. Like,
a lot of crypto Jews over history have sort of maintained some traditions, even though they felt they had to hide their Jewishness because they felt at risk. So I don't know if you know the history of the Jews who were expelled from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal around 1492. So lots of them were forced to convert by the Catholic Church, and yet some converted. They were called conversos, and they kept some traditions. So they would light candles on a Friday night. They did things like that. And often what happened was through the generations that got passed out, nobody really knew why they did it. But that was why they did it. Are there any things like that in your family?
No, I don't think so. But it is some, what I've noticed though, is like in Ethiopian Orthodoxy, there are so many like symbols and that align with Judaism. Like the Star of David comes up quite a bit. So I think that the history of Ethiopian Jews goes so much deeper in Ethiopian history than is conversed about. You know, the population used to be so much greater than we ever even talk about. So there wasn't anything that my mom desperately wanted to assimilate and not be different, you know. Her main goal in life was just to blend in and not rock the boat. So I'm not surprised that I'm sure even if my grandmother preserved some things, I can imagine my mom's need for, you know, self-preservation overcame all of that. And somehow I have none of that in me whatsoever. Zero.
Well, I'm really pleased that you found out what you found out in a place at a time when that's really your initial response, is that happiness and eagerness to find out more, because that is, I suppose, a good reflection of where we are in the world, whereas your mom and your grandmother felt differently because of the circumstances they were in, right?
Yeah. And I imagine like if my mom was me right now and during this time, she probably would have thought twice before like shouting it from the rooftops, but that's just not who I am. That's simply not who I am. And I'm glad to have learned it now and be so proud about it now, because the Jewish community needs something good to happen, to remember that, not everybody is an anti-Semite. Like, someone finding out that they're Jewish is a good thing. Like, someone understands that this is a beautiful community filled with beautiful people with open hearts that just want to give, it's incredibly unique. And I'm blessed to be a part of it.